The fluorescent lights of Riverside Medical Center's rehabilitation wing hummed softly as 16-year-old Elena Rodriguez sat perfectly still in her wheelchair, her fingers moving silently through the air as if touching invisible keys. She had been doing this for the past 20 minutes, her head tilted slightly to catch every note drifting from the old upright piano in the corner of the therapy room. The melody was simple, something one of the younger patients was attempting to play during their occupational therapy session, but Elena could hear the potential buried beneath the hesitant, uneven rhythm. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Elena had been coming to this medical center for 3 years now, ever since the car accident that had taken her sight and left her with limited mobility in her legs. The accident had happened on a rainy Tuesday evening when she was 13, riding home from her school's music recital, where she had just performed a flawless rendition of Chopin's Minute Waltz. Her parents, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez, had been so proud that night, talking excitedly about Elena's musical future as they drove through the winding roads of their small mountain town of Cedar Falls, Colorado. The last thing Elena remembered was the bright headlights of an oncoming truck that had lost control on the wet asphalt. When she woke up in the hospital 3 weeks later, the world had gone completely dark. The doctors explained that the trauma to her optic nerves was irreversible, and the damage to her spinal cord meant she would need a wheelchair for mobility, though she retained some feeling and limited movement in her legs. But what devastated Elena most was learning that the piano in their small apartment had been sold to help pay for medical expenses. Music had been her entire world since she was 4 years old, when her grandmother had first placed her tiny fingers on the keys of an old keyboard at a community center in their neighborhood. Elena's grandmother, Abuela Carmen, had been a music teacher in Mexico before immigrating to the United States. She had recognized something special in Elena's musical instincts from the very beginning. While other children her age were content to bang randomly on the keys, Elena would sit quietly and listen to Carmen play, then attempt to recreate the melodies with startling accuracy. By age 7, Elena was playing complex pieces by ear, never needing sheet music because she absorbed music through her listening and felt it in her hands. The Rodriguez family had never had much money. Carlos worked double shifts at the local factory, and Maria cleaned houses for wealthy families in the affluent part of town. They had managed to afford a second-hand upright piano when Elena turned 10, scraping together money for months to surprise her on her birthday. Elena had cried with joy that day, spending hours exploring every key and discovering the subtle differences in tone and resonance that made each note unique. Now, 3 years after the accident, Elena spent her afternoons in the rehabilitation center while her parents worked. The medical bills had been overwhelming, even with insurance, and both parents had taken on additional jobs to make ends meet. Elena understood why they had sold the piano, but the loss felt like losing a piece of her soul. The only time she could hear real piano music was during her visits to the rehabilitation center, where the ancient upright piano served as part of the occupational therapy program. Richard Thornfield was the head of the rehabilitation department and one of the most respected physicians in the region. He was a tall, imposing man in his late 50s with silver hair and an expensive suit that looked out of place in the modest medical facility. Dr. Thornfield had trained at prestigious institutions back east and often reminded his colleagues and patients about his credentials from Harvard Medical School and his fellowship at Johns Hopkins. He had moved to Cedar Falls 5 years ago to take over the rehabilitation program, bringing with him innovative treatment methods and a reputation for achieving remarkable results with his patients. However, Dr. Thornfield had very specific ideas about what constituted realistic goals for patients with disabilities. He believed in focusing on practical skills that would help patients live independently and find stable employment. When he encountered patients with artistic interests, he often redirected them toward what he considered more achievable pursuits. He had seen too many patients, he claimed, waste precious time and energy chasing dreams that were simply not compatible with their physical limitations. Elena had been under Dr. Thornfield's care since arriving at the center, and their relationship had always been cordial but distant. He appreciated her intelligence and her dedication to her physical therapy exercises, but he had made it clear that he considered her continued interest in music to be somewhat impractical. During their sessions, he would often suggest that Elena focus on developing computer skills or consider pursuing a career in telephone customer service, fields where her blindness would not be a significant barrier. The piano in the therapy room was a 1970s Baldwin upright that had been donated by a local family several years earlier. It was severely out of tune, missing several keys, and had a sustain pedal that stuck intermittently. Most of the staff considered it barely functional, suitable only for basic exercises with patients who were relearning fine motor skills. The instrument was primarily used by occupational therapists who would have patients practice simple finger movements and coordination exercises. Elena had been drawn to this piano from her very first day at the center. Even though it was damaged and neglected, she could hear its potential. During breaks between her physical therapy sessions, she would ask the staff if she could sit near it, ostensibly to rest but actually to listen whenever someone else was using it. She began to understand the instrument's quirks and limitations, mentally cataloging which keys were unresponsive and which strings had lost their proper tension. The therapy room was always busy during the day, filled with patients working on various rehabilitation exercises. There were veterans relearning to walk after injuries, stroke survivors regaining speech and motor skills, and accident victims like Elena working to adapt to new physical realities. The atmosphere was generally positive and supportive, with patients encouraging each other through difficult moments and celebrating small victories together. Elena had made several friends among the other patients, but she was particularly close to Tommy Martinez, a 19-year-old who had lost his right arm in a workplace accident. Tommy was learning to adapt to using prosthetics, and he often sat with Elena during their rest periods. He had noticed her fascination with the piano and had started asking her questions about music. Elena would explain different musical concepts to him, describing how melodies worked and why certain chord progressions created specific emotional responses. One afternoon in late October, Elena was having her regular session with Dr. Thornfield to review her progress and discuss her treatment goals. They met in his office, a spacious room with diplomas and awards covering the walls. Elena sat in her wheelchair across from his large mahogany desk, listening to him flip through her medical charts and case notes. "Elena, I'm very pleased with your progress in physical therapy," Dr. Thornfield said in his measured professional tone. "Your upper body strength has improved significantly, and your wheelchair mobility skills are excellent. You've also done well with your orientation and mobility training." "Thank you, Dr. Thornfield," Elena replied politely. "I've been working hard on all the exercises." "That's exactly what I like to hear," he continued. "Now as we look toward your future, I think it's time we started discussing some practical career training options. I've been in contact with several programs that specialize in job placement for individuals with visual impairments." Elena felt her stomach tighten slightly, sensing where this conversation was heading. Dr. Thornfield had brought up career training several times before, always focusing on what he called realistic opportunities. "There's an excellent program for computer data entry that I think would be perfect for you," he said, his voice taking on an enthusiastic tone. "They provide specialized software that converts text to speech, and many of their graduates find stable employment with good benefits. There's also a customer service training program that has a very high success rate." "Those sound like good opportunities," Elena said carefully, not wanting to seem ungrateful but feeling a familiar sadness whenever these conversations arose. "I know you've maintained an interest in music, Dr. Thornfield said, and Elena could hear a slight shift in his tone that suggested he was about to address something he found problematic. "Music can certainly be a wonderful hobby, and I encourage patients to maintain interests that bring them joy. However, I think it's important that we focus your energy on developing skills that will provide you with a secure future." Elena had heard variations of this speech before, but today something inside her felt different. Maybe it was because she had been listening to the piano in the therapy room earlier, or maybe it was because she had been feeling increasingly frustrated with the limitations everyone seemed to place on her life. "Dr. Thornfield," she said, her voice quiet but steady, "I understand that you want me to have a secure future, and I appreciate that. But music isn't just a hobby for me, it's who I am." Dr. Thornfield leaned back in his chair, and Elena could hear the leather creaking. "Elena, I admire your passion. I really do. But we need to be realistic about what's possible. Professional music careers are extremely competitive and difficult even for people without physical challenges. For someone in your situation, the odds of achieving success in that field are simply not favorable." "But I've been playing piano since I was 4, Elena said, feeling her confidence growing. "Even after the accident, I can still hear music and understand it in ways that I think might be special." "I'm sure you have musical abilities," Dr. Thornfield replied, his tone becoming slightly patronizing. "But there's a significant difference between enjoying music and having the skills necessary for a professional career. Classical music in particular requires years of formal training, the ability to read complex sheet music, and technical precision that is developed through intensive study with master teachers." Elena felt heat rising in her cheeks. "I know I haven't had formal training, but I've learned many difficult pieces just by listening and practicing. My grandmother taught me music theory, and I can play pieces that most people my age couldn't handle." "Doctor."
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
Thornfield's chair creaked again as he shifted position. "Elena, I don't want to discourage you from enjoying music in your personal time, but as your doctor, it's my responsibility to help you set achievable goals. The reality is that professional musicians need to be able to read sheet music fluently, and they need perfect technical execution. These are simply not realistic expectations for someone with your visual impairment." The words stung Elena more than she had expected. She had dealt with people doubting her abilities before, but hearing it from someone she was supposed to trust, someone who was supposed to help her reach her potential, felt particularly painful. "I think, Doctor," Thornfield continued, "that your time and energy would be much better invested in practical skills that will guarantee you independence and financial security. These computer programs I mentioned have excellent track records, and you have the intelligence to excel in those fields." Elena sat quietly for a moment, feeling a familiar mixture of frustration and self-doubt. Part of her wondered if Dr. Thornfield was right. Maybe she had been fooling herself about her musical abilities. Maybe the accident had taken away more than just her sight and mobility. Maybe her dreams of making music professionally were just naive fantasies. "I understand your concerns," Elena said finally, her voice smaller than it had been at the beginning of the conversation. "I'll think about the programs you mentioned." "Excellent, Doctor," Thornfield said, and Elena could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "I'll have my assistant send you some information about the application processes. I really think you'll find these opportunities exciting once you learn more about them." As Elena left Dr. Thornfield's office and made her way back to the therapy room, she felt deflated and confused. She had always believed that music was her calling, something that made her feel connected to the world in a way that nothing else could. But maybe that was just wishful thinking. Maybe she needed to accept that some dreams were simply not compatible with her new reality. When Elena arrived in the therapy room, most of the other patients had finished their sessions for the day. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the heating system and the distant sound of traffic outside. Elena positioned her wheelchair near the old piano, as she often did when she needed to think. She placed her hands in her lap and tried to process what Dr. Thornfield had said to her. The piano sat silent and neglected in the corner, its bench pushed slightly askew from the last patient who had used it. Elena could smell the old wood and the faint mustiness that came from an instrument that hadn't been properly maintained. Despite its obvious problems, she still felt drawn to it. There was something about the potential she could sense in its worn keys and stretched strings that spoke to something deep inside her. Elena had never actually played this piano, though she had been tempted many times. The occupational therapists had never specifically offered to let her use it, and she had been afraid to ask, worried that someone might think she was being presumptuous or taking time away from other patients who needed it for their therapy exercises. But today, sitting alone in the quiet room with Dr. Thornfield's words echoing in her mind, Elena felt a sudden surge of determination. She wanted to know if she could still play, if the music was still inside her hands and heart despite everything that had happened. She wanted to know if Dr. Thornfield was right about her limitations, or if there was still something real and valuable in her musical abilities. Elena wheeled her chair closer to the piano and carefully transferred herself to the bench. The transition was awkward but manageable, something she had practiced in physical therapy for situations where she needed to move from her wheelchair to other seating. The bench was the wrong height and wobbled slightly, but Elena managed to position herself so that her feet could reach the pedals, even though her leg strength was limited. She placed her hands on the keys for the first time in over 3 years. The touch was different from what she remembered from her family's piano. Some keys felt sluggish and unresponsive, while others seemed to stick halfway down. The surface of the keys was worn smooth in some places and rough in others where the ivory had chipped away. Elena started with something simple, a basic scale to test the instrument's response and to reacquaint her fingers with the feeling of playing. Even this simple exercise revealed the piano's numerous problems. Several keys in the middle register produced no sound at all, and many others created buzzing or rattling noises instead of clear tones. The sustain pedal was indeed stuck, creating a muddy echo-filled sound that made it difficult to distinguish individual notes. But despite all these problems, Elena felt a familiar joy spreading through her chest as her fingers moved across the keys. The connection between her thoughts and her hands felt natural and immediate, as if the 3 years without a piano had been nothing more than a brief pause. Her muscle memory was intact, and her understanding of musical relationships seemed as clear as ever. Elena decided to attempt something more challenging. She began playing a simplified version of Bach's Prelude in C major, one of the first complex pieces her grandmother had taught her. She had to adjust constantly for the piano's broken keys, transposing sections to different octaves and modifying chord voicings to work around the instrument's limitations. But even with these adjustments, the essential beauty of the music came through. As Elena played, she became lost in the flow of the melody and harmony. The problems with the piano faded into the background as she focused on expressing the musical ideas that had been stored in her memory for years. She found herself adding her own interpretive touches, subtle changes in timing and dynamics that reflected her personal understanding of the piece. Elena was so absorbed in her playing that she didn't notice Dr. Thornfield enter the therapy room. He had been walking past when he heard piano music coming from inside, and he had stopped to investigate. The sound was unexpected because the room was supposed to be empty, and he knew that none of his staff members were accomplished pianists. Thornfield stood in the doorway for several minutes, listening with growing surprise to what he was hearing. Despite the obvious problems with the instrument, the music being produced was sophisticated and musically mature. The pianist was demonstrating advanced technical skills and a deep understanding of musical structure and interpretation. When Elena finished the Bach's Prelude, she immediately transitioned into another piece, Debussy's Clair de Lune. This was an even more challenging selection that required delicate touch and subtle control of dynamics. Elena adapted the piece to accommodate the piano's limitations, but her interpretation was nuanced and emotionally compelling. Dr. Thornfield found himself genuinely moved by the performance. He had heard professional musicians many times at various cultural events and charity functions, and what he was listening to compared favorably to anything he had experienced. The technical execution was impressive, but what struck him most was the emotional depth and artistic maturity of the interpretation. Thornfield several moments to realize that the person playing was Elena Rodriguez, the young patient he had just finished counseling about pursuing more practical career goals. The revelation was shocking and deeply uncomfortable. The same girl he had told to abandon her musical dreams was producing some of the most beautiful piano music he had ever heard. Elena had moved on to a third piece, something more dramatic and technically demanding. Dr. Thornfield recognized it as Chopin, though he couldn't identify the specific composition. Elena's playing was becoming more confident and expressive as she adjusted to the piano's quirks and limitations. Her fingers moved with remarkable speed and precision across the keys, navigating complex passages that would challenge even experienced pianists. Dr. Thornfield felt a growing sense of unease as he listened. His expertise was in medicine and rehabilitation, not music, but he had enough cultural education to recognize exceptional talent when he encountered it. What he was hearing was not the playing of an amateur hobbyist. This was the work of a serious musician with genuine artistic ability. When Elena finally stopped playing, the therapy room fell into complete silence. She sat at the piano bench with her hands resting on the keys, breathing slightly heavily from the physical and emotional intensity of the performance. She felt exhilarated and drained at the same time, as if she had just had a conversation with an old friend she hadn't seen in years. "That was quite impressive," Dr. Thornfield said quietly from the doorway. Elena startled at the sound of his voice and quickly turned toward where he was standing. She hadn't realized that anyone had been listening, and she felt a flush of embarrassment at being discovered.
"Thornfield," she said, her voice uncertain. "I'm sorry. I hope it was okay for me to use the piano. I know it's for therapy exercises, and I didn't mean to. How long have you been able to play like that?" Dr. Thornfield interrupted, his tone serious and focused. Elena hesitated, unsure how to answer. "I've been playing since I was little. My grandmother taught me when I was 4. "No," Dr. Thornfield said, stepping into the room. "I mean, how long have you been able to play at that level? What I just heard was not beginner or intermediate piano playing. That was advanced, possibly professional level performance." Elena felt confused by his reaction. Less than an hour ago, he had been telling her that musical careers were unrealistic for someone with her disabilities. Now he seemed genuinely surprised by her abilities. "I don't know," Elena said honestly. "I've always just played by ear. My grandmother taught me music theory and helped me understand how pieces were constructed, but I learned most of my repertoire just by listening and practicing." Dr. Thornfield moved closer to the piano, studying Elena with a different kind of attention than he had ever shown before. "What pieces were you just playing?" "The first one was Bach's Prelude in C major," Elena explained. "Then Debussy's Clair de Lune, and the last one was Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major." "And you learned all of those by ear?" Dr. Thornfield asked, his voice betraying his amazement. "Yes," Elena said simply. "I had recordings of them, and my grandmother would help me work through the difficult sections. She would explain the harmonic progressions and help me understand why the composers made certain choices." Dr. Thornfield was quiet for a long moment, processing what he had just witnessed. He prided himself on being a rational, scientifically minded person who made decisions based on objective evidence. But the evidence of his own ears was contradicting everything he had assumed about Elena's musical abilities and her potential for a career in music. "Elena," he said finally, his voice taking on a different quality than she had ever heard before, "I owe you an apology. What I said to you earlier in my office was based on incomplete information. I made assumptions about your abilities without actually assessing them properly." Elena felt a mixture of vindication and confusion. She had spent the afternoon doubting herself and questioning whether her musical dreams were realistic. Now the same doctor who had discouraged her was acknowledging that he had been wrong. "I don't understand," Elena said.
You said that people with visual impairments couldn't develop the skills necessary for professional music careers. Dr. Thornfield felt deeply uncomfortable as he heard his own words repeated back to him. I was wrong, he admitted. I was speaking from ignorance and prejudice, not from medical knowledge or professional expertise. What you just demonstrated clearly shows that visual impairment is not necessarily a barrier to developing exceptional musical abilities. Elena still felt uncertain about how to respond. But you said that professional musicians need to be able to read sheet music, and that they need perfect technical execution. You may not be able to read traditional sheet music, Dr. Thornfield said, but what you've developed instead is arguably more impressive. The ability to learn complex compositions by ear and to interpret them with such musical maturity is actually quite rare, even among professionally trained musicians. Elena felt a spark of hope beginning to grow in her chest, but she was afraid to trust it completely. Do you really think I could be good enough to pursue music professionally? Thornfield hesitated, not because he doubted Elena's talent, but because he was realizing how little he actually knew about the music industry and what opportunities might be available for someone in Elena's situation. I think, he said carefully, that you have abilities that deserve to be nurtured and developed. What I don't know is how to help you do that. My expertise is in medical rehabilitation, not in music education or career development. Elena nodded, understanding the distinction. But you think it's worth pursuing? Based on what I just heard, Dr. Thornfield said with conviction, I think it would be a tragedy if you didn't pursue it. The two sat in silence for a moment, both processing the implications of this revelation. Elena felt as if a door had opened in her mind, allowing her to imagine possibilities that she had been forcing herself to abandon. Dr. Thornfield felt the uncomfortable realization that his well-intentioned guidance had nearly steered a genuinely talented young person away from her true calling. What do you think I should do? Elena asked. Dr. Thornfield considered this question seriously. I think we need to find someone who knows more about music than I do, someone who can properly assess your abilities and help you understand what opportunities might be available. Elena felt excited, but also overwhelmed. I wouldn't even know where to start looking for someone like that. Let me make some inquiries, Dr. Thornfield said. I have colleagues in other departments, and I'm sure someone knows music teachers or professionals in the area. In the meantime, I think you should continue practicing whenever you have the opportunity. Elena looked toward the old piano with new appreciation. Would it be okay if I used this piano sometimes? I know it's not in very good condition, but, Elena, Dr. Thornfield interrupted. After what I just heard, I think this piano would be honored to have you play it, regardless of its condition. As Elena transferred back to her wheelchair and prepared to leave the therapy room, she felt a sense of possibility that she hadn't experienced since before her accident. The conversation with Dr. Thornfield had been unexpected and confusing, but it had also opened up a new vision of what her future might hold. Dr. Thornfield watched Elena leave the room, and then he stood alone next to the old piano, thinking about the remarkable performance he had just witnessed. He realized that his assumptions about disability and potential had been challenged in a fundamental way. Elena had not overcome her visual impairment to become a good musician. She had developed musical abilities that transcended the need for sight entirely. That evening, Dr. Thornfield went home to his suburban house and found himself unable to stop thinking about Elena's performance. He lived alone since his divorce 3 years earlier, and his evenings were usually filled with medical journals and case studies. But tonight, he found himself searching online for information about blind musicians and music education for students with visual impairments. What he discovered was both encouraging and humbling. There were indeed many successful blind musicians throughout history, from classical performers to jazz legends to contemporary artists. There were also specialized music programs and institutions that had developed innovative teaching methods for students with visual impairments. Dr. Thornfield realized that his ignorance about these resources was inexcusable. As a medical professional working in rehabilitation, he should have been aware of the full range of possibilities available to his patients. His narrow focus on traditional employment options had nearly caused him to discourage a patient from pursuing a field where she clearly had exceptional ability. The next morning, Dr. Thornfield arrived at work early and immediately began making phone calls. He contacted colleagues at other medical centers, music departments at local colleges, and arts organizations in the region. He explained that he had a patient with extraordinary musical abilities who needed guidance and assessment from qualified music professionals. By the end of the day, Dr. Thornfield had gathered several promising leads. A professor in the music department at the State University had expressed interest in meeting Elena. There was also a regional conservatory that had experience working with students with disabilities, and a local symphony orchestra that had an education outreach program. When Elena arrived for her regular therapy session the next afternoon, Dr. Thornfield asked her to come to his office before beginning her exercises. Elena felt nervous, wondering if he had changed his mind about her musical abilities or if he had reconsidered his offer to help her find music education resources. Elena, Dr. Thornfield said as soon as she was seated across from his desk, "I've spent the past day making inquiries about music education opportunities in our area, and I have some very encouraging news." Elena felt her heart begin to beat faster with anticipation. "I spoke with Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who is a professor of piano at the State University," Dr. Thornfield continued. "When I described your performance yesterday, she became very interested in meeting you. She has experience working with students who have various learning differences, and she specializes in developing alternative methods for music education. She wants to meet me," Elena asked, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "She wants to hear you play and assess your abilities," Dr. Thornfield explained. "If she believes you have the potential for advanced study, she might be willing to work with you privately or help you apply for admission to the university's music program." Elena felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. "When could I meet her?" "I've arranged for her to come here next week," Dr. Thornfield said. "She wants to hear you play on the piano you're familiar with, rather than asking you to perform in an unfamiliar environment." Elena was so overwhelmed with gratitude that she could barely speak. "Dr. Thornfield, I don't know how to thank you for this." "You don't need to thank me," he replied. "I'm simply trying to correct a mistake I made yesterday. You have a gift that deserves to be developed, and it's my responsibility as your doctor to help you access the resources you need." Over the next week, Elena found herself practicing at the rehabilitation center's piano for hours every day. Dr. Thornfield had spoken with the therapy staff and arranged for Elena to have extended access to the instrument so she could prepare for her meeting with Dr. Mitchell. Elena worked on expanding her repertoire, reviewing pieces she had learned years ago and attempting some new compositions that she had heard but never tried to play. She also spent time working on technical exercises to strengthen her fingers and improve her precision. The other patients and staff members began to notice Elena's extended practice sessions, and word spread throughout the center about her remarkable musical abilities. Many people would find excuses to walk past the therapy room during Elena's practice time, drawn by the beautiful music emerging from the old damaged piano. Tommy Martinez, Elena's friend who was learning to use prosthetics, became one of her most enthusiastic supporters. He would sit in the therapy room during his own rest periods, listening to Elena play and asking her questions about the music. Elena found that explaining musical concepts to Tommy helped her think more clearly about her own techniques and interpretations. As the day of Dr. Mitchell's visit approached, Elena felt increasingly nervous and excited. This meeting would determine whether her dreams of pursuing music professionally were realistic or simply wishful thinking. She had been disappointed by authority figures before, and she tried to prepare herself emotionally for the possibility that Dr. Mitchell might not be as impressed with her abilities as Dr. Thornfield had been. On the morning of the scheduled meeting, Elena arrived at the rehabilitation center earlier than usual. She wanted extra time to warm up and practice the pieces she had selected for her audition. She had chosen 3 contrasting compositions that she felt best demonstrated her technical skills and musical understanding: Bach's Italian Concerto, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, and Ravel's Pavane for a Dead Princess. Dr. Mitchell arrived at the center just after lunch, accompanied by Dr. Thornfield. Elena heard their voices in the hallway outside the therapy room as they approached, and she felt her stomach flutter with nervousness. Everything she had been working toward for the past week was about to be tested. "Elena," Dr. Thornfield said as they entered the room, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the University Music Department." "It's very nice to meet you, Elena," Dr. Mitchell said warmly. Elena could tell from her voice that she was probably in her 40s, with a gentle but confident manner of speaking. "Thank you for coming to hear me play," Elena replied politely. "I hope I won't disappoint you." "I'm sure you won't," Dr. Mitchell said. "Dr. Thornfield has told me wonderful things about your musical abilities. I'm very much looking forward to hearing what you've prepared." Elena transferred from her wheelchair to the piano bench, a movement she had now practiced so many times that it felt natural and confident. She positioned herself at the keyboard and took a deep breath to center herself mentally. "I've selected 3 pieces that I hope will show different aspects of my playing," Elena explained. "I'll start with Bach's Italian Concerto." As Elena began to play, Dr. Mitchell immediately understood why Dr. Thornfield had been so enthusiastic about this young musician. Even on the damaged and out-of-tune piano, Elena's performance was sophisticated and musically mature. Her technical execution was impressive, but what struck Dr. Mitchell most was the depth of musical understanding evident in her interpretation. Elena played with confidence and expression, adapting seamlessly to the piano's limitations while maintaining the essential character of the music. Her timing was impeccable, her dynamics were carefully controlled, and her phrasing demonstrated a natural understanding of Baroque style and structure. When Elena finished the bass piece and moved on to the Chopin Ballade, Dr. Mitchell found herself even more impressed. The ballade was an extremely challenging composition that required advanced technical skills and sophisticated musical interpretation. Elena's performance was not just competent, it was genuinely moving and artistically compelling. Dr. Mitchell glanced at Dr. Thornfield during Elena's performance and saw that he was watching with obvious pride and satisfaction. She understood now why he had been so eager to arrange this meeting. Elena was not simply a talented amateur, she was a serious musician with professional-level abilities. Elena's final selection, Ravel's Pavane, showcased yet another dimension of her musical personality. Her interpretation was subtle and impressionistic, demonstrating her ability to adapt her technique and expression to different stylistic periods and compositional approaches. When Elena finished her audition, the therapy room fell into complete silence. Dr. Mitchell needed a moment to process what she had just heard before she could respond appropriately. "Elena," Dr. Mitchell said finally, "that was absolutely extraordinary. Your technical skills are impressive, but what amazes me most is your musical maturity and artistic insight. You play with the sensitivity and understanding of someone who has been studying music professionally for many years." Elena felt a rush of relief and joy, but she tried to remain composed. "Thank you. I've been working very hard to prepare for today. How did you learn these pieces?" Dr. Mitchell asked. "Did you have recordings to work from?" "Yes," Elena explained. "I listen to recordings and work out the fingerings and interpretations section by section. My grandmother taught me music theory, so I understand how the harmonies work and why the composers structured the pieces the way they did." Dr. Mitchell shook her head in amazement. "Elena, what you've accomplished is truly remarkable. Learning these compositions by ear requires not just musical talent, but exceptional memory, analytical skills, and artistic intuition. Elena felt her confidence growing as she listened to Dr. Mitchell's assessment. "Do you think I could be good enough to study music seriously?" "Elena, Dr. Mitchell said with conviction, "I think you could be good enough to study music at any level you choose. Based on what I've heard today, you have the potential to pursue a professional career as a performing musician." Elena felt tears of joy beginning to flow down her cheeks. After years of being told to focus on more practical goals, hearing a qualified music professor validate her dreams felt almost surreal. "What would I need to do to get started?" Elena asked. Dr. Mitchell smiled. "That's exactly what we need to discuss. There are several options we should explore, depending on your goals and interests." Elena felt as though her entire world had just shifted on its axis. The meeting with Dr. Mitchell had not only confirmed her musical abilities, but had opened up possibilities she had never dared to imagine. As she sat at the old piano in the rehabilitation center's therapy room, surrounded by the support and encouragement of people who believed in her potential, Elena realized that her accident had not ended her musical journey. Instead, it had led her to discover new depths of passion and determination that she might never have found otherwise. The road ahead would certainly be challenging, but for the first time since her accident, Elena felt confident that her dreams were not only possible but inevitable. The music that had sustained her through the darkest period of her life was about to become the foundation for a future filled with purpose and possibility. Dr. Mitchell spent the next hour with Elena, discussing various pathways for advanced musical education and professional development. She explained that there were several prestigious music programs specifically designed for students with exceptional abilities who had learned through non-traditional methods. She also mentioned scholarship opportunities and grants available for students with disabilities who demonstrated outstanding artistic potential. Elena listened with growing excitement as Dr. Mitchell outlined possibilities she had never imagined. There were summer intensive programs, masterclass opportunities, and even the potential for private study with renowned professional musicians. Mitchell was particularly interested in Elena's ability to learn complex compositions by ear, explaining that this skill was highly valued in many professional contexts. As their conversation continued, Dr. Mitchell began to understand the full scope of Elena's musical journey. She learned about Elena's grandmother, Carmen, who had provided the foundation for Elena's musical education, and about the piano that had been sold after the accident. Dr. Mitchell also heard about the years Elena had spent listening to the damaged piano in the therapy room, developing her understanding of musical performance despite having no instrument to practice on. Mitchell finally prepared to leave. She made Elena a promise that would change everything. She explained that she had access to practice rooms at the university that were equipped with high-quality grand pianos, and she offered to arrange for Elena to have regular access to these instruments. She also proposed beginning weekly private lessons to help Elena develop the technical refinements and performance skills that would prepare her for auditions at major music institutions. Elena could barely contain her emotions as she thanked Dr. Mitchell for her generosity and encouragement. For the first time since her accident, she felt that her musical dreams were not only possible but actively supported by people with the knowledge and resources to help her achieve them. Dr. Thornfield watched this interaction with a mixture of satisfaction and humility. He was pleased that his efforts to connect Elena with appropriate resources had been successful, but he was also deeply aware of how close he had come to discouraging her from pursuing her true calling. The experience had taught him important lessons about making assumptions and the dangers of limiting patients' aspirations based on incomplete understanding. Over the following weeks, Elena began making regular trips to the university campus for her lessons with Dr. Mitchell. The transition from the broken piano at the rehabilitation center to the magnificent Steinway grand piano in Dr. Mitchell's studio was overwhelming at first. Elena had never played an instrument of such quality and responsiveness, and she needed time to adjust her technique to take full advantage of its capabilities. Dr. Mitchell was amazed by how quickly Elena adapted to the new instrument. Within just a few sessions, Elena was producing sounds of incredible beauty and sophistication. Her natural musical instincts, combined with years of developing acute listening skills, allowed her to explore the full dynamic and tonal range of the grand piano with remarkable sensitivity. During these early lessons, Dr. Mitchell focused primarily on expanding Elena's repertoire and refining her technical approach. She introduced Elena to compositions by composers she had never encountered, including contemporary works and pieces from different cultural traditions. Elena absorbed this new material with extraordinary speed, often learning complex pieces after just a few hearings. Dr. Mitchell also began working with Elena on performance skills that went beyond pure musical execution. She taught Elena how to present herself confidently on stage, how to communicate with audiences through her playing, and how to manage the psychological pressures that came with public performance. These lessons were particularly important because Elena would need to audition for competitive programs and scholarships. Elena's family was initially overwhelmed by the rapid changes in her life and prospects. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez had spent 3 years adjusting to a reality where their daughter's future would be limited by her disabilities. The sudden emergence of genuine opportunities for Elena to pursue professional music education required them to completely reconsider their expectations and plans. Carlos was particularly concerned about the practical aspects of Elena's musical pursuits. He worried about the financial costs of advanced education, the uncertainty of career prospects in the arts, and whether Elena was setting herself up for disappointment if things didn't work out as hoped. These were reasonable concerns from a father who had worked multiple jobs to support his family and who valued stability and security above artistic fulfillment. Maria was more supportive of Elena's musical aspirations, but she also had concerns about the demands and pressures of a professional music career. She had seen how devastated Elena had been after the accident, and she didn't want her daughter to experience another major disappointment if her musical dreams proved unachievable. Elena understood her parents' concerns, but she also felt a deep conviction that music was her true calling. The hours she spent practicing at the university filled her with joy and purpose in a way that nothing else in her life had matched. She felt that she was finally becoming the person she was meant to be, and she was willing to accept the risks and uncertainties that came with pursuing her dreams. Dr. Mitchell helped Elena and her family navigate these complex decisions by providing detailed information about scholarship opportunities, career prospects for professional musicians, and the support systems available for students with disabilities in higher education. She also arranged for Elena to meet with successful professional musicians who had overcome various challenges to build thriving careers. One of these meetings was particularly influential. Mitchell introduced Elena to Marcus Chen, an internationally acclaimed pianist who had been born with a genetic condition that affected his vision. Marcus had built a successful career performing with major orchestras around the world, and he had developed innovative techniques for learning and memorizing complex repertoire without relying on traditional sheet music. Marcus spent an entire afternoon with Elena, sharing his experiences and offering practical advice about pursuing a professional music career. He explained that the music world was becoming increasingly open to artists with disabilities, and that Elena's unique background and learning methods could actually be advantages in many professional contexts. Marcus also addressed Elena's parents' concerns about career stability and financial security. He explained that professional musicians had access to diverse income streams, including performance fees, teaching opportunities, recording contracts, and arts administration positions. He emphasized that talent and dedication were the most important factors in building a successful music career, regardless of physical challenges. This conversation was transformative for Elena's entire family. Carlos and Maria began to understand that their daughter's musical abilities represented genuine opportunities for professional success, not just artistic fulfillment. They also realized that supporting Elena's musical education was an investment in her future independence and self-sufficiency. With her family's full support secured, Elena threw herself into her musical studies with unprecedented intensity. She practiced for hours every day, working not only on technical exercises and repertoire expansion, but also on developing the artistic maturity and interpretive depth that would distinguish her from other talented musicians. Dr. Mitchell introduced Elena to the concept of musical research and analysis, teaching her to study the historical and cultural contexts of the pieces she played. Elena learned about the lives and artistic philosophies of major composers, the evolution of different musical styles, and the interpretive traditions associated with various works. This intellectual approach to music complemented Elena's intuitive understanding and gave her performances additional layers of meaning and sophistication. Elena also began participating in masterclasses and workshops with visiting artists. These experiences exposed her to different teaching methods and performance philosophies, helping her develop her own unique artistic voice. Many of the guest artists were impressed by Elena's technical abilities and musical maturity, and several offered to work with her further if she decided to pursue advanced study. As Elena's reputation began to spread within the regional music community, she started receiving invitations to perform at local events and fundraisers. These early performance opportunities were crucial for building her confidence and experience as a public performer. Elena discovered that she had a natural ability to connect with audiences and communicate emotional content through her playing. One particularly significant performance opportunity came when the local symphony orchestra invited Elena to perform as a soloist at their annual gala fundraiser. This was a high-profile event attended by many influential people in the community, including potential donors and supporters who could provide opportunities for Elena's continued development. Elena chose to perform Grieg's Piano Concerto in A minor, a beloved work that showcased both technical brilliance and emotional depth. She had learned the piece entirely by ear over several months, working with Dr. Mitchell to refine her interpretation and ensure seamless coordination with the orchestra. The weeks leading up to the gala performance were intense and demanding. Elena practiced with the orchestra multiple times, learning to follow the conductor's direction and to adapt her playing to blend with the instrumental ensemble. This was her first experience performing with professional musicians, and the learning curve was steep but exhilarating. Elena's family, friends from the rehabilitation center, and supporters from the university all planned to attend the gala. Thornfield was particularly excited about the performance, as it represented the culmination of the journey that had begun with Elena's secret practice session on the broken piano in his therapy room. Tommy Martinez, Elena's friend from the rehabilitation center, had been following Elena's progress with enthusiasm and pride. He had been one of the first people to recognize her exceptional abilities, and he felt personally invested in her success. Tommy had learned to play basic melodies on the therapy room piano himself, inspired by Elena's example and encouraged by her patient teaching. As the night of the gala approached, Elena felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that was both familiar and entirely new. She had performed many times before, but never on such a large scale or with such significant professional implications. This performance would be her formal introduction to the broader musical community, and its success could open doors to opportunities she had only dreamed about. The gala was held at the city's premier performing arts center, a magnificent venue with perfect acoustics and a concert grand piano that was maintained to the highest professional standards. Elena had the opportunity to practice on this instrument several times before the performance, and she was amazed by its responsiveness and tonal beauty. On the evening of the performance, Elena arrived at the venue early to warm up and mentally prepare. She wore an elegant black dress that her mother had chosen specially for the occasion, and she felt both sophisticated and comfortable. Dr. Mitchell was there to provide support and encouragement, along with Elena's family and many of her supporters from the rehabilitation center and university. As Elena waited backstage, listening to the symphony orchestra perform the first half of the program, she reflected on the remarkable journey that had brought her to this moment. 3 years ago, she had been a devastated teenager who thought her musical dreams had been destroyed forever. Now she was preparing to perform with professional musicians in front of an audience that included some of the most influential people in the regional arts community. When the time came for Elena's performance, she made her way confidently onto the stage. The audience fell silent as she appeared, and Elena could feel the anticipation and curiosity of hundreds of people who had heard about her story and abilities. She positioned herself at the grand piano and waited for the conductor's signal to begin. The opening orchestral section of Grieg's concerto was dramatic and powerful, building tension and expectation for the piano's entrance. Elena listened carefully to every nuance of the orchestra's performance, preparing to blend her playing seamlessly with their interpretation. When her moment arrived, she began the famous opening piano passage with authority and confidence. From the very first notes, it was clear that something special was happening on stage. Elena's playing was not just technically proficient, it was inspired and deeply moving. She brought a unique interpretive voice to the familiar concerto, highlighting melodic lines and harmonic progressions that many audience members had never noticed before. The coordination between Elena and the orchestra was flawless, despite the complexity of the piece and the challenges of performing without visual cues. Elena had developed an acute sensitivity to the conductor's musical direction, and she responded to subtle changes in tempo and dynamics with remarkable precision. As the concerto progressed through its 3 movements, Elena's performance became increasingly confident and expressive. She navigated the technical challenges of the piece with apparent ease, but what impressed the audience most was the emotional depth and artistic maturity of her interpretation. Elena was not simply playing the notes accurately, she was telling a story through music. The second movement of the concerto featured a beautiful dialogue between the piano and the orchestra, with Elena's playing taking on an almost conversational quality. Her ability to shape melodic phrases and create subtle dynamic contrasts demonstrated a level of musical sophistication that many professional musicians struggle to achieve. The final movement of the concerto was a tour de force of technical brilliance and artistic excitement. Elena's fingers flew across the keyboard with incredible speed and accuracy, but every note was purposeful and musically meaningful. The coordination between the piano and orchestra reached new levels of precision and artistic unity. As Elena played the final dramatic chords of the concerto, the audience erupted in spontaneous applause even before the last notes had faded. The ovation continued for several minutes, with many audience members rising to their feet in recognition of what they had just witnessed. Elena remained seated at the piano for a moment, overwhelmed by the audience's response and the intensity of the musical experience she had just shared. When she finally stood to acknowledge the applause, her face was radiant with joy and accomplishment. The conductor and orchestra members were among the most enthusiastic in their applause, having experienced firsthand Elena's remarkable musical abilities and professionalism. Several orchestra members approached Elena after the performance to express their admiration and to offer future collaboration opportunities. Dr. Mitchell was in tears as she watched Elena receive the audience's ovation. She had worked with many talented students over her career, but Elena's combination of natural ability, dedication, and artistic maturity was truly extraordinary. The performance had exceeded even Dr. Mitchell's highest expectations. Elena's family was overwhelmed with pride and emotion. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez had watched their daughter transform from a devastated accident victim into a confident and accomplished artist. They realized that Elena's musical gifts had not only survived her physical challenges, but had been refined and strengthened by the adversity she had overcome. Dr. Thornfield was among the audience members, and he felt a complex mixture of emotions as he watched Elena's triumph. He was deeply proud of her achievement and grateful that he had been able to play a small role in connecting her with the resources she needed. But he was also humbled by the reminder of how close he had come to discouraging her from pursuing her true calling. After the performance, Elena was surrounded by well-wishers and supporters who wanted to congratulate her and learn more about her story. Many audience members expressed amazement at her technical abilities and musical maturity, and several asked about her training and future plans.
Among the people who approached Elena was Dr. Rebecca Harrison, the dean of the music school at one of the most prestigious conservatories in the country. Dr. Harrison had been visiting the area for a conference and had attended the gala at Dr. Mitchell's invitation. She was deeply impressed by Elena's performance and wanted to discuss potential opportunities for advanced study. Harrison explained that her conservatory had recently established a new scholarship program specifically designed for exceptional students who had developed their abilities through non-traditional methods. The program provided full financial support along with specialized academic and artistic resources. Elena would be an ideal candidate for this program if she was interested in pursuing conservatory-level education. Elena was almost speechless as she listened to Dr.
Harrison's offer. The conservatory she represented was one of the most respected institutions in the world, with alumni who had gone on to successful careers as soloists, chamber musicians, and teachers. The opportunity to study there would represent the fulfillment of dreams Elena had never dared to articulate. Dr. Mitchell was equally excited about this unexpected opportunity. She had hoped that Elena's gala performance would open doors to advanced study opportunities, but she had not anticipated attracting attention from such a prestigious institution so quickly. Dr. Harrison invited Elena to visit the conservatory for a formal audition and interview process. She explained that while Elena's performance tonight had been impressive, the conservatory would need to conduct a comprehensive assessment of her abilities and potential before making a final admission decision. Elena accepted the invitation immediately, understanding that this represented a crucial step toward her goal of building a professional music career. The audition would be challenging and competitive, but Elena felt confident that her abilities and dedication would speak for themselves. Over the following weeks, Elena prepared intensively for her conservatory audition. Dr. Mitchell helped her select an audition program that would showcase the full range of her technical and artistic abilities, including works from different historical periods and stylistic traditions. Elena chose to include Bach's Goldberg Variations, Beethoven's Sonata No. 23, Appassionata, Chopin's Ballad No. 4, and Debussy's Estampes in her audition program. This repertoire demonstrated her ability to handle complex contrapuntal writing, dramatic romantic expression, virtuosic technical challenges, and impressionistic color and atmosphere. Learning this extensive repertoire in a short time frame required Elena to practice with unprecedented intensity and focus. She spent hours every day at the university, working through each piece measure by measure until every detail was memorized and refined. Dr. Mitchell provided constant guidance and feedback, helping Elena develop interpretations that were both personally meaningful and artistically sophisticated. Elena also prepared for the academic components of the audition process, including music theory assessments and interviews about her musical background and goals. Dr. Mitchell helped Elena articulate her unique learning methods and explained how her ear-based approach to music study had contributed to her artistic development. The trip to the conservatory was Elena's first time traveling to a major metropolitan city, and she was both excited and overwhelmed by the urban environment. The conservatory campus was magnificent, with state-of-the-art practice facilities, concert halls, and academic buildings that housed some of the world's most renowned music faculty. Elena's audition took place in a small recital hall with perfect acoustics and a concert grand piano that was even finer than the instrument she had become accustomed to at the university. A panel of faculty members, including Dr. Harrison, listened as Elena performed her prepared program. From the opening notes of the Bach Variations, it was clear that Elena's playing had reached a new level of maturity and sophistication. Her technical execution was flawless, but more importantly, her musical interpretation demonstrated deep understanding and personal insight. She played each piece with conviction and artistry that impressed even the most demanding faculty members. The faculty panel asked Elena to read some musical examples, which presented a unique challenge given her inability to see traditional sheet music. However, Elena had developed alternative methods for quick musical analysis, and she was able to demonstrate her understanding of musical structure and harmony through verbal explanation and keyboard illustration. During the interview portion of the audition, Elena spoke eloquently about her musical journey and her goals for future study. She explained how her accident had actually deepened her relationship with music, forcing her to develop listening skills and musical memory that had become central to her artistic identity. The faculty members were impressed not only by Elena's abilities, but also by her maturity, determination, and clear sense of artistic purpose. They recognized that Elena would bring unique perspectives and experiences to their program that would enrich the entire conservatory community. 3 weeks after her audition, Elena received a phone call that would change her life forever. Dr. Harrison called to inform her that she had been accepted to the conservatory with a full scholarship that would cover tuition, room and board, and provide additional support for specialized equipment and resources. Elena was so overcome with emotion that she could barely respond coherently to Dr. Harrison's congratulations. The acceptance represented the culmination of years of dreams and months of intensive preparation. She would be studying with some of the most renowned piano teachers in the world, performing with exceptional fellow students, and preparing for a professional career that had once seemed impossible. Dr. Mitchell was equally thrilled when Elena shared the news. She felt proud and fulfilled knowing that she had played a crucial role in helping Elena access the opportunities she deserved. Their work together had been one of the most rewarding teaching experiences of Dr. Mitchell's career. Elena's family celebrated the acceptance with a mixture of joy and amazement. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez realized that their daughter's conservatory education would provide her with independence, career opportunities, and personal fulfillment that surpassed anything they had imagined possible after her accident. Dr. Thornfield learned about Elena's acceptance when she visited the rehabilitation center to share her news with the staff and patients who had supported her journey. He felt deeply moved and gratified to see how far Elena had come from that day when he had discouraged her from pursuing musical dreams. Tommy Martinez and the other patients at the rehabilitation center were inspired by Elena's success and what it represented about the potential for overcoming challenges and pursuing ambitious goals. Elena's story had become a source of hope and motivation for everyone who encountered it. As Elena prepared to leave for conservatory in the fall, she reflected on the extraordinary series of events that had transformed her life. The broken piano in the therapy room, Dr. Thornfield's change of heart, Dr. Mitchell's mentorship, and her own determination had combined to create opportunities that exceeded her wildest dreams. Elena knew that her conservatory education would present new challenges and demands, but she felt confident and prepared for whatever lay ahead. She had learned that her disabilities were not limitations on her potential, but had actually contributed to the development of unique strengths and perspectives that made her a distinctive and valuable artist. The journey from that first secret practice session on the damaged piano to acceptance at one of the world's finest conservatories had taught Elena that dreams worth pursuing were worth fighting for, regardless of the obstacles that might stand in the way. She had discovered that her true strength lay not in overcoming her disabilities, but in embracing the unique gifts and perspectives that her experiences had given her. Elena's first semester at the Westmont Conservatory was both exhilarating and overwhelming. The campus buzzed with musical activity from dawn until midnight, with practice rooms occupied by dedicated students working on everything from Baroque fugues to contemporary compositions. Elena had been assigned to work with Professor David Kellner, a renowned pianist who had performed with major orchestras worldwide and maintained a studio of only 12 carefully selected students. Professor Kellner was initially skeptical about working with a student who couldn't read traditional notation, but his doubts evaporated during Elena's first lesson. As she performed Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2, he realized he was witnessing something extraordinary. Elena's interpretation was not only technically flawless but revealed musical insights that many of his doctoral students had yet to develop. The other students in Elena's class came from diverse backgrounds, but most had studied at elite preparatory programs and had access to private instruction from early childhood. Elena initially felt intimidated by their extensive formal training and their fluency with music theory terminology that she was still learning. However, she quickly discovered that her unique approach to learning and interpretation brought fresh perspectives that even her most accomplished classmates found valuable. Elena's daily routine was demanding. She practiced 6 hours each day, attended academic classes in music history and theory, participated in chamber music ensembles, and worked with coaches on specific technical challenges. The intensity was greater than anything she had experienced, but Elena thrived under the structured environment and high expectations. One of Elena's most significant challenges was adapting to ensemble playing with other advanced musicians. Chamber music required precise timing, subtle communication, and the ability to balance individual expression with collaborative artistry. Elena's acute listening skills proved advantageous in this context, as she could detect minute changes in tempo, intonation, and phrasing that helped her anticipate and respond to her partner's musical choices. Professor Kellner introduced Elena to repertoire she had never encountered, including works by contemporary composers who explored extended techniques and unconventional harmonic languages. Learning these pieces required Elena to expand her analytical methods and develop new approaches to memorization and interpretation. Midway through her first semester, Elena received unexpected news that would test everything she had learned about perseverance and self-advocacy. Professor Kellner informed her that she had been selected to compete in the Whitmore International Piano Competition, one of the most prestigious contests for young musicians worldwide. The competition would take place in 6 months, providing Elena with barely enough time to prepare the required repertoire. The program included a Bach prelude and fugue, a complete Mozart sonata, a Chopin work of her choice, and a contemporary piece. Additionally, competitors would need to perform a concerto with orchestra in the final round. Elena was simultaneously honored and terrified by this opportunity. The Whitmore competition attracted the most talented young pianists from around the globe, many of whom had been preparing for such contests their entire lives. Elena had never participated in a formal competition, and she worried about whether her unconventional background would be perceived as a disadvantage. Professor Kellner assured Elena that she had been selected precisely because her unique artistic voice and exceptional abilities deserved recognition on an international stage. He explained that the competition's mission was to identify musicians who would shape the future of classical performance, and Elena's distinctive approach to musical interpretation aligned perfectly with that vision. Elena threw herself into competition preparation with unwavering determination. She worked with Professor Kellner to select repertoire that would showcase her strengths while challenging her to grow as an artist. For the Bach selection, she chose the Prelude and Fugue in C-sharp minor from the Well-Tempered Clavier, a complex work that demanded both technical precision and deep structural understanding. Her Mozart selection was the Sonata in A minor, K. 310, one of the composer's most emotionally intense keyboard works. Elena's interpretation emphasized the piece's dramatic contrasts and subtle motivic development, revealing layers of meaning that distinguished her performance from more conventional approaches. For the Chopin requirement, Elena selected the Ballad No.
3 in A-flat major, a piece that allowed her to demonstrate both lyrical sensitivity and virtuosic brilliance. Her interpretation was deeply personal, reflecting her own journey through adversity and transformation. The contemporary work proved most challenging, as Elena had to learn John Adams's Phrygian Gates, a minimalist composition that required stamina, rhythmic precision, and an understanding of gradually evolving musical processes.
Elena spent countless hours analyzing the piece's structure and developing memorization strategies that would allow her to navigate its repetitive but constantly shifting patterns. For the concerto round, Elena and Professor Kellner selected Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 3, widely considered one of the most demanding works in the piano repertoire. Elena had always been drawn to Rachmaninoff's emotional intensity and melodic richness, and she felt confident that she could bring unique insights to this beloved but challenging composition. As the competition date approached, Elena's preparation intensified. She performed complete run-throughs of her program multiple times each week, working to build the stamina and mental focus required for high-pressure performance situations. Professor Kellner arranged for Elena to perform before faculty panels and student audiences, simulating the competitive environment she would face. Elena's family made plans to attend the competition, which would be held in Chicago. Carlos and Maria Rodriguez had watched their daughter's transformation with amazement and pride, and they wanted to witness this culminating moment in her artistic development. Dr. Mitchell also planned to attend, along with Dr. Thornfield, who had followed Elena's progress with deep personal interest. The week before the competition, Elena received a phone call that almost derailed her preparation entirely. A journalist from a major music magazine had learned about Elena's story and wanted to write a feature article about her upcoming competition appearance. The journalist was particularly interested in the dramatic contrast between Elena's unconventional background and the elite world of international piano competition. Elena was torn between wanting to share her story and worrying that media attention would create additional pressure and distraction. Professor Kellner advised her to decline the interview until after the competition, explaining that maintaining focus and mental clarity was paramount during the final preparation phase. However, word of Elena's participation had already begun circulating within the classical music community. Several prominent musicians and critics expressed interest in hearing this young artist who had developed her abilities through such unique circumstances. The attention was flattering but also intimidating for Elena, who preferred to let her music speak for itself. On the day of departure for Chicago, Elena felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness that reminded her of her emotions before the gala performance that had launched her professional journey. She packed carefully, ensuring she had everything needed for optimal performance preparation, including her lucky water bottle and the small wooden figurine her grandmother had given her years ago for good luck. The competition venue was the historic Millennium Auditorium, a magnificent concert hall known for its perfect acoustics and intimate atmosphere. Elena had the opportunity to practice on the competition piano the day before her first round performance, and she was impressed by the instrument's responsiveness and tonal beauty. The competition format included 3 rounds held over 5 days. The first round required each competitor to perform a 40-minute solo recital. Elena was scheduled to perform on the second day, allowing her time to observe other contestants and acclimate to the competitive atmosphere. Watching the other competitors perform was both inspiring and intimidating. Elena heard extraordinary playing from musicians representing conservatories and music schools from around the world. The technical standards were uniformly excellent, and many performers demonstrated sophisticated musical understanding and compelling artistic personalities. When Elena's turn arrived, she walked onto the stage with the same quiet confidence she had developed through months of intensive preparation. The audience included the competition jury, other contestants, and classical music enthusiasts who attended the public performances. Elena's opening Bach prelude immediately established her distinctive artistic voice. Her interpretation was architecturally clear and emotionally compelling, revealing the complex interplay between intellectual structure and expressive content that defined Bach's greatest keyboard works. The fugue that followed demonstrated Elena's remarkable ability to voice multiple independent melodic lines while maintaining overall musical coherence. The Mozart Sonata showcased Elena's sensitivity to classical style and her ability to find drama and intensity within the composer's refined musical language. Her performance was both historically informed and personally expressive, avoiding the extremes of academic correctness and romantic excess that often characterized young musicians' approaches to Mozart. Elena's Chopin ballad was the emotional centerpiece of her program. Her interpretation was deeply personal without being self-indulgent, finding the perfect balance between technical display and musical substance. The audience was visibly moved by her performance, and several jury members were seen taking extensive notes. The Adams piece concluded Elena's recital with a tour de force of rhythmic precision and architectural understanding. Elena navigated the work's complex patterns and gradual transformations with absolute security, demonstrating that her musical intelligence extended far beyond traditional romantic repertoire. When Elena finished her performance, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. She could feel that something special had occurred, though she tried not to interpret the audience's response too optimistically. Competition audiences were generally supportive, and Elena knew that the jury's private deliberations would ultimately determine her advancement. Results from the first round were announced the following evening. Elena's name was among the 12 competitors selected to advance to the semi-final round. She felt relief and excitement, but also renewed pressure as the stakes increased and the competition field narrowed. The semi-final round required a 50-minute recital, with more demanding repertoire requirements. Elena would perform her Rachmaninoff concerto with piano reduction, along with additional solo works that would further demonstrate her range and artistic maturity. Elena's semi-final performance took place 3 days later. By this time she had settled into the competition routine and felt comfortable with the venue and atmosphere. Her Rachmaninoff performance was passionate and technically secure, demonstrating her ability to sustain dramatic intensity across the concerto's substantial length and complexity. When the finalists were announced, Elena's name was called third among the 6 competitors who would advance to the final round. She had achieved something remarkable simply by reaching this stage, but Elena was determined to give her absolute best in the final performance. The final round would feature each competitor performing their chosen concerto with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, conducted by Maestro Jonathan Hirsch. Elena would be performing fourth in the evening program, giving her time to observe other contestants while managing her own pre-performance preparation. Elena's family, Dr. Mitchell, Dr. Thornfield, and Professor Kellner all attended the final round concert. Elena felt supported and encouraged by their presence, though she was careful not to let their expectations add unnecessary pressure to her performance. When Elena walked onto the stage for her final performance, she felt a sense of calm determination that surprised her. The months of preparation had built her confidence to the point where she trusted completely in her musical instincts and technical preparation. Her performance of the Rachmaninoff concerto was transcendent. Elena and the orchestra achieved a level of musical communication and collaboration that elevated the performance beyond mere technical accomplishment. Her interpretation was both personally expressive and stylistically authentic, revealing new depths in this familiar masterwork. The audience's response to Elena's performance was overwhelming. The sustained ovation lasted nearly 10 minutes, with many audience members rising to their feet in recognition of the extraordinary musical experience they had just witnessed. When the competition results were announced later that evening, Elena was awarded second place, along with a special prize for Most Promising Young Artist. While she had not won the grand prize, Elena felt proud of her achievement and grateful for the opportunity to share her musical voice with an international audience. The competition experience transformed Elena's career prospects dramatically. Recording contract offers, concert management inquiries, and invitations to prestigious festivals and master classes poured in over the following weeks. Elena had established herself as a major emerging talent in the classical music world. 6 months later, Elena made her professional debut with the New York Philharmonic, performing the same Rachmaninoff concerto that had brought her international recognition. The performance was broadcast nationally and received enthusiastic reviews from major music critics. Dr.
Thornfield attended Elena's New York debut, reflecting on the remarkable journey that had begun with Elena's secret practice session on the broken piano in his rehabilitation center. He had learned important lessons about the dangers of limiting patients' aspirations and the importance of supporting dreams that might seem impossible. Elena's success had inspired changes in the rehabilitation center's approach to patient care. The facility now employed a music therapist and had acquired several quality instruments for therapeutic and recreational use. Elena's story had become a source of hope and motivation for patients facing their own challenges and uncertainties. As Elena continued to build her professional career, she never forgot the people and experiences that had shaped her artistic development. She established a scholarship fund to support young musicians with disabilities and regularly returned to Cedar Falls to perform benefit concerts for the Rehabilitation Center and community organizations. Elena's grandmother Carmen lived to see her granddaughter's professional success, attending several of Elena's early concerts before passing away peacefully at age 85. Carmen's musical legacy lived on through Elena's playing, which always retained the warmth and emotional directness that her grandmother had instilled in her from childhood. 10 years after her competition breakthrough, Elena had become one of the most respected pianists of her generation. She performed regularly with major orchestras, recorded acclaimed albums and taught at the same conservatory where she had once been a student. Her unique background and distinctive artistic voice had enriched the classical music world and inspired countless young musicians to pursue their own dreams with courage and determination. Elena's story demonstrated that exceptional talent could emerge from unexpected circumstances, and that the most beautiful music often came from artists who had overcome significant challenges. Her journey from a devastated teenager in a rehabilitation center to an internationally acclaimed pianist proved that dreams pursued with passion and supported by caring mentors could indeed become reality. The broken piano in the therapy room had been replaced years ago, but Elena sometimes returned to sit in that same space where her professional journey had truly begun. She would remember Dr. Thornfield's transformation from skeptic to supporter, Dr. Mitchell's generous mentorship, and her own determination to prove that music had no boundaries that couldn't be transcended by talent, hard work and unwavering belief in the power of artistic expression. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.